How y'all doing there? For this review, I'm going to go over another book, which is in the realm of heroic fantasy or sword and sorcery, whichever label you prefer. And how I found out about this character is through a YouTube video I can't seem to find nowadays, but it was this YouTube video of this YouTuber's favorite heroic fantasy character. You know, many of us are familiar with his choice picks: Conan, Red Sonja, Elric, Kane by Carl E. Wagner, what have you. But he mentions Imaro. And I never heard of his character before, so I looked him up. It was, written by Charles R. Saunders, and this book I have was published back in '81. It originally started as short stories and regular fanzines. He later collaborated it to his own into his own book, and he did 3 other novels and a 4th one, which I think takes place. I could be wrong the number of them, but he did a few books of the main character and one anthology that takes place in the world of Imaro. So what's the deal with Imaro that may appeal to you in the genre? Well, take a look. He's a black sword and sorcery character. Most of us who are familiar reading into this genre here usually involves characters from outside Africa or Africa type environment, and they have their adventures there. But we don't hear much from main characters who are native to such things. At least mass market appeal and all that. You may have read some especially today, but not so much in the past. Robert Howard's written his share of tales of his characters going to Africa, but Conan, I think he in the story Red Nails goes south, which I think is in Sicily, if I recall. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's in an area which would be Africa today, according to Robert Howard's map. And of course, he makes Solomon Kane, which he has a couple adventures in Africa. But again, we don't have too much natives, from that area as main characters in such stories. Edgar Rice Burroughs, again, is another example. He's written many about people going into such environments, and also parts of Asia where it's just outsiders having adventures in these unknown lands. This one is a native from Africa or Africa type environment in his own adventures. So that's the appeal to it. In fact, if anything, you take a look at this cover I have here, and I'll discuss this in a bit. It's the epic novel of a Black Tarzan. And of course, this is a way to sell the novel. Most people at the time would be familiar with Tarzan, but there was a bit of a controversy there. And again, I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so on to the review itself. We're introduced to a world called the Inyambani. I'm sorry if I pronounced this incorrectly. It's a setting that is a parallel world to Africa. So this is the way Saunders can put in all the elements that we think of African cultures in its own fantasy setting. And a lot of it has a look and feel of what we're familiar with, and he could put his own fantasy twist on this as well, but I'm digressing. So we're introduced to the Yasai tribe, a fierce nomadic warrior tribe here, and we're dealing with a woman who was part of this tribe, but she exiled herself for quite a while and comes back with a young boy of a few years. Now, also when she returns, she kicks out the sorcerer who had ill intent for the Yasai tribe, and probably a lot more once they get further. She was originally arranged to be married to this guy, but finds out that he's up to no good, so she fights him off. She exposes him for what he is, and so gets rid of him, but doesn't kill him. So because of that, she makes a deal with the Yasai that she'll be banished, but in return, the Yasai will take her son and train him to be a full-fledged warrior. So Imaro they make an agreement, and Imaro is set to his training, which is this training lasts from about just 5 reigns, as they call it, to when he reaches to near adulthood. And he'll have to go through some rite of passage, and when he does, becomes a full-fledged warrior. Now, Imaro grows up very powerfully strong. He's stronger than anybody in the tribe has ever before. This is good because he gets a lot of crap. In fact, he gets because his mother made the debut of having a child from somebody not of the Yasai tribe. He's considered a son of no father. So he gets a lot of flack for that, especially from kids in his own age as they're going through the rite of passage. So he has rivalries among them. And he goes on a few series of adventures, eventually to the story where he goes through his rite of passage, which involves him killing a lion by his, of his own hand, and all by himself, in front of witnesses. He does this, as a reader, but then he realizes that the witnesses do not see him kill the lion. They think he cowered back, and they consider him a coward and a disgrace. They were under an enchantment. So Imaro is captured, he's tortured, and about to be executed. He later escapes, and then he starts to track down who put this enchantment on him and gets his revenge. Turns out it was a wizard that his mother kicked out years ago. So he finds a little bit, about his past in here. So eventually Imaro, after he solves this area, he goes off on his own, surviving on his own, and he comes across, and then he has a few adventures here. This is like 5 stories all strung together here. He comes across a city of the giant kings, which I gotta tell you, in this copy isn't here, but according to Wikipedia here, when Nightshade's books published Imaro into collections, he took that story out, and because it was too much resembling to one to genocide, according to this. I'm not so sure. Maybe this is true. Maybe it's on his website, which I'll link down below. Digressing again. So he goes to a city where he becomes a slave for a while to the giant kings, and later he leads a rebellion and gets it out. He later next story involves, this picture right here where he fights an evil monstrous demon type creature here. This is a cool picture by Kelly there, but the description of the monster was much more grotesque. Still good all the way. So eventually, it's him going through a series of adventures to find out a bit of his own acceptance and identity. And what I liked about this, unlike say other short stories involving characters where they're kind of beginning and end, the character doesn't necessarily grow that much, but you get might have some development. This one, I like the fact that the character does stand on his own, is that he does try and develop from him not being accepted to finding it, to at least accepting himself and having people accept him. So I do like the growth and development on this. So there's even in the last story there an Atlantis parallel. So this city derived by these people from an island colony called Atlan. Of course, that's Atlantis in parallel. As a typical sword and sorcery affair, I just thought it was a wonderful read. I mean, if you want to have a sword and sorcery series that has takes place in Africa type environments, which hasn't been explored before, but this time with a black character, this is definitely for you, and it's well worth a read. Of course, what is reading stories like this without some interesting monsters for our hero to go up against? And there are some interesting ones in here that only someone of Imaro's unhuman strength can face against. Let me describe you one. This is from a sorcerer that changes forms because it's the price he pays for the immense power he asks for from the dark forces, so to speak. Let's see. Chitendu was even more inhuman than his resurrected minions. Elephantine legs rose like wrinkled tree trunks from the ground. Long, bony arms hung like sticks from a pair of narrow, knobby shoulders. The hands were incongruously delicate and graceful. Other than his head, those hands were the only remotely human features Chitendu had left. His torso was worst of all, a mass of withering tendrils that seemed imbued with a life independent from that of the rest of the hideous form. Like a swarm of maggots infesting a rotting carcass, the tendrils withered, expanding, contracting in the anchors of grotesque alien flesh. They glowed green, like tomb fungus, some of them curling around the shafts of Imaro's arm. So things like that, really get you into these intense moments. Of course, the cover itself is not just a random scene of just to include a character in something. This is in one of the stories in there, and while this is generally correct, it's actually described as much more grotesque in the story. Cool painting all the same by Kelly. But there's also this one of the last monsters he fights in this book is described as a giant, chimera. The upper half is of a hairless ape with huge, large fangs, like a hunting cat, or larger than hunting cats inscribed in here. And the lower half is of a buffalo. So don't worry, there's plenty of interesting creatures for our hero to go against here. So. Now, going back to what I said earlier about the little additional description here, an epic novel of a black Tarzan, at the time, Saunders was not, really fond of that, but then again, here was the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate, which sued him, to get that label off, because they were, I guess, they were litigious about that. I would probably see them getting away with this if this was an author in the back of the books, just giving praise to everything about that. So unfortunately, because of this lawsuit that delayed the release of this book, which according to Saunders, that most likely affected his sales, which is why a lot of you may not know this as well as you would other sword and sorcery heroic fantasy characters. I keep mentioning the names of those genres there. This is almost a subgenre of itself called sword and souls, so I guess African based sword and sorcery. So just a little sidetrack here. So as I said, Saunders didn't like it at first, but according to the blog, which again I'll link down below, he says that if he questioned himself that if he saw a book written by somebody else with that description on it, would he go ahead and buy it? Says yes. I mean, there's a reason why you do stuff like this. It's good marketing. If you're familiar with something like Tarzan, then this will catch your eye and say, hey, you might like this one, and you may like what the difference is in this compared to what you normally read in the genre. So there you go. I don't want to get political about this because, especially with current fiction about representation and all this, you have stuff being produced out there that a lot of us would like to get into, except that it's putting more politics into this that's pretty blatant and not much on good story and characters. For those of you who hate, that don't like that, give this a shot. It's published, this one was published back in the early 80s. There's a few other books involved in that. Let's see. As I got Imaro right here. He also did the Quest for Kush, the Trail of Bahu, and the Nema Wars. He's also written, back in 2017, mind you, the Nyambani Tales, which is an anthology of stories that take place in the same world as Imaro. So if I ever find the other books, I definitely want to give them a read. And if you like sword and sorcery, you like the idea of this character without the modern politics involved, give this one a go. Charles R. Saunders here, he has his own website there. He even has his own blog, so you can find out more about him. He definitely understands his genre. In fact, he gives, he likes, Kane, Conan, gives credit to all these guys. And he's been writing stories set in this type of African type world. So again, definitely worth to put in, give it a shot here, and hopefully I'll find more of these and read those and finish off the series there. The anthology one does appeal to me as well. What other adventures happen in this world? So there you go. Imaro, the epic novel of a black Tarzan. Give it a go there. Thank you all for watching. You have a nice day.